Start recording. So, hi, this is Roger Smith, and this is a new format for me. We have Steve McDonald here. Hi, Steve.
Blessings.
And what I want to do is, in this format, what I really want to do is just have a little bit more of a detailed discussion. And today's discussion has to do with Manning School and the changing of the name or the issue with the name. So, Steve, just let us know the story about Thomas Manning. And if you can shape up the story with Thomas Manning for those who don't know who he is and what he was about, tell us about that, how the school got to be supposedly given to the descendants of slaves or not. And just go with it, and I'm just going to make you vibe and I'll ask some questions. Go ahead,
Sure,
Steve.
sure. Thank you. And you have to keep me on time because, as
Yeah,
them
yeah, yeah.
say,
No problem at all.
yeah. All right, thanks. And greetings to your viewers and listeners. So Thomas Mannings was a slave owner, um, a sugar plantation owner who also owned slaves
Right.
back in the days. And in 1710, he wrote a will and bequeathed his property in Burn Savannah, plus the cattle that he had, and also 14 slaves. 14 slaves, and the slaves were actually 13 Indians. Sorry, 13
Yeah.
Negros that's actually in his will, and one Indian. And they were named Tom, Ruan, Ruan, Chiba,
Yeah.
Pika, Daniel, Margarita, Hagar, Dido, Didio, Isaac, Rose, Kate, Prunas, Pruna dash SS. I think that pronounced it's actually Prunas Maria and Dick. So those were the names of the 14 slaves, 13, and it was specified 13 Negros and one Indian. And it was left in trust so his will stated that his property was left in trust to his friends, Roland William Grant and Captain George Goodwin, Dr. Hugh Kirkpatrick, and William Dorrell, and
Okay.
their several heirs for the use and trust thereafter mentioned. So apparently, these people uh, mentioned, these was it 1, 2, 3, 4, were supposed to hold the school in their interest and in perpetuity, passing down through their children.
Okay.
Now, in addition to that, it also said that in addition to bequeathing those slaves, it also went on further to say, and their lot. So their offsprings were also supposed to continue to be enslaved
Okay.
and to work towards maintaining the school which he had bequeathed. So it was given, what was given was the Cabarito River. It was adjoining the Cabarito River, all the houses, buildings, and plantation up on this, and the pen, and also what else? 100 head, number one, cattle, which was 100, two riding horses, two mares, two colts, and said slaves labor and to provide labor and produce the slaves with the produce of my land and profits from my pen of cattle, and my will is that the benefit and income arising from same my trustees before shall appropriate. I'm just trying to get out the legalities and appropriate the
So what
use
are,
and
what are you actually reading now?
the actual will
Okay,
to
okay.
tutor and keeping of a free school in the parish of Westmoreland,
Okay.
to set out and to instruct and educate youth. So let's start from there. That the will was very specific in terms of it was to educate the youth that was there. But
And when you
remember,
say
at the
youth, are we
time,
talking about white youth, black youth, slave
that's
youth?
where I was going. So
Okay.
at that time, it was only white people who were being educated. So one can confer from that that it was to his intent was to educate for it to educate to go towards educating white children. And
Okay.
remember, the blacks, 13 niggers, were the slaves which were bequeathed and their lot. And their lot. Don't forget that.
Okay.
You and I, their offsprings, were supposed to continue and provide labor to fund this school. So that is what transpired. At the time, other historians have wrote that one of the reasons why, so typically what was happening then, based on what I've read, is that normally the children of the plantation owners, once they reach of age, would go back to England to be schooled, to be educated. But what started to happen during that time, the slavery wasn't as appealing, and it started to get a bit more difficult to get slaves in, and so it started to become more expensive in terms of getting slaves and the whole voyage and everything, because the business had now developed, and so it wasn't as profitable during that time. So the idea was then for to set up our own school. So the other thing that I also learned that it was done because he was off. So another historian, and I gathered this was a historian from school, Mr. Brown. I understand. No, I got this secondhand because Mr. Brown had passed away before I was able to speak with him.
Okay.
But he mentioned it to someone else that he's a historian and he was doing some checks, and he found out that Thomas Manning was ill, and he wanted to go back to England to seek treatment, and from that he got rid of his assets by through his will to set up the school, and then from there he then went back to England. I did a, a AI search and about Thomas Manning, and this one seemed to uh, coincide with no, I can't verify its authenticity, and it's something that we can do later on. But it says that he was born about 1647 and he died in 1722. So the dates seem to match up. And so it was a British plantation owner and slave trader, and he was a member of the Manning family, which we know, and they were prominent slave owners and traders in the Caribbean during this time. He owned several plantations in Jamaica, including the Manning's estate in Westmoreland, which was a large sugar plantation that relied heavily on enslaved laborers. He was known to have over 100 enslaved people, and his plantation was one of the largest on the island. Manning's was also involved in transatlantic slave trade, and his ships transported enslaved people from Africa to the Caribbean. He was a wealthy and influential man in Jamaica and served as a member of the Jamaican Assembly and as a justice of the peace. Despite his wealth and status, Manning's legacy is complex and controversial as his fortune was built on the exploitation and enslavement of people of African descent.
Hey, Steve.
And yes,
So let's assume that from all you've read and whatever all you've said, Thomas Manning was a slave owner and probably a brutal slave owner. Let's assume
well,
that.
we don't have to assume that he was a slave owner. We know that, and
Okay.
his will said that.
Okay.
I think with regards to the brutality part of it, I think that goes hand in hand with slave owners. I think
Yep.
the
No,
mere
no, no.
fact that you're owning people, it means that you're brutal, right?
So
So,
let me ask you this:
mhm.
how did we that went to the school get the impression that Thomas Manning was a good man that gave the school so that blacks could be educated? That's the story. If I hadn't met you and spoken to you specifically, I would have thought here was this good man that on his dying bed he wanted to see blacks educated, and he gave us a school. That was what was taught to us. So I want to know why do you think that was taught to us, and and who benefits from telling that tale?
Some interesting questions. So how did we get here? And so a lot of us, so just to probably add a bit of context, a lot of us believe that Thomas Manning's left the school for the children of slaves, and I too also thought that when we went into in first form we had to write about the history of Manning's, and that was my impression. It was afterwards in a conversation with someone else, another elder or a elder, who told me that that wasn't the case and suggested that I go and research it. Now, as they say, if you want to hide something from people, you put it in a book. So it was
I'm
written. It
glad.
was
I'm
there.
glad you didn't say a type of person. You know what I mean? Because you would be proliferating whatever that you're saying. But go ahead. Yeah, hide it. Yes, yes. Hide it in a
I
book.
try to be
Okay.
politically correct.
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
don't think that we suffer. We or a type of person suffer is the only set of people who don't read.
Right, right.
But yeah, it was there. It was always in the historical aspect of it. But and even now, speaking to other people, recent graduates, they don't even know that there were slaves involved, right?
Right.
Even now. So even now, the history. So your original question, how we got here, or what's the misinterpretation, if I can call it that, or the lack of knowledge, is that our history is not being taught properly to us or accurately to us. And and for I don't know what the motivation is. I don't know what the reasons are. Still, even though a lot of people know who Thomas Mannings is, they or was, they still believe him to be someone great, and what he did was great. As we say, to each his own, right? I don't know if it's the Stockholm syndrome, but or I don't know if it's something deeper in that, because as Africans, we have no ties as descendants of Africans who were taken from the motherland and brought into this country. We are like a tree without roots, and we have no ties with our African heritage or past, and so we really don't care about it. I say this to people that for most of us, we don't know further than two generation back, or our parents or our grandparents. We hardly knew our great grandparents. So with that, we have no regards for our historical aspect of yeah, we have no regards for history. Even on Mannings right now, at Mannings right now, there is nothing, not one single thing apart from in the will. There is nothing which records the that there were 14 slaves, there were 13 niggers and one Indian. Much
Right.
more so their name. On our crest, we acknowledge the cow, we acknowledge the crocodile, we acknowledge the river, or some may say it's the sea. We acknowledge what is either uh, a grass or cane, but we don't acknowledge the people, the
Okay.
14 enslaved, which are our foreparents, and it's
So
mind-boggling, my
so what
brother.
I what I what I want to what I really want to get from you, Steve, is I've
Mhm.
picked up all this passion, and and I still want you to go through why you think the name should be changed. But there's a lot of passion, and there's a lot of names that could be changed. For example, your name is McDonald. You could say, hey, I'd like to have a Ghanaian or a Nigerian surname. Where does it stop? So that's what I'm trying to say. And then I wanted to know how is it received about the name change because of the fact that this guy used to be a slave owner.
Right. So I believe the name should actually be changed because it has done, it has immortalized Thomas Manning's Thomas Manning. It has immortalized him, and it also glorify him, right? And it takes away, and in addition to the fact that the facts aren't being shared or being changed to fit a particular narrative, what he did to our foreparents is not recorded anywhere. So he's being glorified for something which was never his intent, and what is attached to the Stockholm syndrome or whatever. So he's being glorified for something which um wasn't his intent in terms of providing a school for people like us, right? So it should be changed for that purpose. Just like how Germany removed Hitler's name from everything, from their public records or so forth. So that should be done, and what the name should be changed, I don't know. I can't say that. I won't profit to say what it should be changed to, right? I have a lot of ideas, but I don't want to say, I don't want to pick one thing or the other, right? There are lots of names that it could be changed to. Where do we stop or where do we go? Um, I think from a personal perspective, if people want to change their name, I mean, certainly can go about it, right? In doing that, um, we are ultimately one people, right? But let's not forget, or let's not skate over the reason why I'm a mulatto, right?
Yeah. But look at it this look at I
But
try and
but
look
just
at
to answer,
things.
but just to finish answer your question though, just to finish answer your question. Certainly, I the name of the roads that we have, because we have a Beckford Street. Beckford was actually a slave owner. Quite a lot of the streets in and around Sablamar
Yeah.
are name of slave owners in Jamaica. Period. Right. We have the famous Lady Musgrave Road, and there are history to that. I think they certainly
Steve,
the
where does it stop though? That's what my big deal. Where does it
I'm
stop? Because
answering. I'm
okay.
answering. The names, certainly the names of our streets, the name of our towns, right? Anything like what Germany did, anything that has any attachment to our colonial past should be changed.
Yeah. Okay, okay. But understanding that you're just talking about colonial past, but sometimes I, I always feel that we have this habit of acting as though the world began with the slave triangle. there was times when, Africans were ruling Europe. And in my mind, I just think to myself, most of the southern part of the United States has all of these monuments. And I just think that if we start tearing things down, I think we will not remember too, because sometimes the symbols show us and remember the dark paths that we walked, and maybe not to go past. But hear this out. You mentioned Hitler, and
Let me
you
just
know,
respond to that 1 quick minute
yeah,
before
yeah,
you move on. Yeah, yeah. Because guess what they will be in? They'll be in books.
understood.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
not
they will be
anymore.
they will be in history books. And what we don't do, when you want to
Read,
hide things from people, you
read.
put them in books. Yeah. So
So you
I
mentioned,
appreciate the significance of the monuments, but I still don't appreciate the you can put the monuments in museums, my friend, but don't have them parade over us,
right. Well,
right?
you mentioned Hitler, and
Yes.
Leopold was even worse.
Right.
All right, much worse. But we don't hear about him. You
Right.
notice that?
Yeah.
And if you
And we
listen
have no
to,
one to blame but ourselves, though, my brother. Just like how we have no one to blame but ourselves for what is happening with our little piece of our own world. So you have the broader picture, which is Jamaica, and you have the smaller picture, which is Manning's, right? And the Germans were brave enough to face their history and deal with it, right? Confront the good and the bad, and they said, yeah, this was bad, but we can't
every
do that.
German shouldn't feel responsible, yeah, for the actions of Hitler, and the fact that they are all ashamed or are taught to be ashamed, I think, is a travesty. Um, but you spoke about Hitler, but you could talk about Gaddafi. You could talk about Idi Amin. You could talk about Saddam Hussein. As far as I'm concerned, if you listen to Western media, you would think that all of these guys are monsters. You would think they're monsters. So I am of the kind of person that I'd like to push myself away from the table. I don't, as a black man, I know I'm black, but guess what? Sometimes we have to be a citizen of this planet. And I say that to say, you know, the white man, the Indian guy, everybody is holding their own. And at some time, there may have been a time when they were up and when they were down. I look at the Indians, and I don't know this for a fact, but I will tell you this much. The Indians hate the Pakistanis, who are their cousins, more than they do the English that drew the line between them. So, I personally just try and step back. So when I see you with this passion, Steve, I just wonder, are you getting caught up in the small things?
Everyone have to have their own. Everyone have their own beliefs, and what is important to them. Every nation would have their come to Jesus moment, if I can put it that way, right? And so it is for everyone to determine what is important to them, right? I can't determine, or I won't ever try to determine what should be important to someone else. I would say what is important to me. I'm probably, yeah, I'm trying to, yeah, I'm in terms of my how I believe, what I share what my belief is with regards to Thomas Manning. If they don't feel that way, cool, we move on,
And
right,
you know what?
from there.
I actually think it's very powerful, and I actually admire the fact that you have a stance, and I hope you're open to the fact that some people just shrug their shoulders and says, well, slave owner or not, it's the name, and over time things may be uncovered, and maybe he was a gentle slave owner and he wasn't as cruel as the man up the road. But what does it do for me and you? That's all I'm gonna say. But it's a different. Hey, Steve,
Okay.
it's a different view.
So again, what does it do? I think a lot of our challenge that we have, if you will notice, for the most part, and Jamaica lacks any culture. We One thing that I've noticed is that for the most part, we don't have any culture, or any strong culture that we can tie to. What I find our culture is more North American type culture. No, right now I'm seeing, watching Jamaican TV. I'm seeing a lot of Indian movies on there.
Right.
Our clothing and everything. I remember once, there was this big thing about, Miss Lou bandana clothes that she used to wear.
Right.
Back in the days, we used to have the maypole dance and those type of dance that we had. Then, we moved to, calypso. We started to have some calypso and so forth. I think well, probably one of the greatest thing that, from a cultural perspective, our music have moved from, ska and gone on to reggae. But now we're now the reggae into dancehall. So you can see that was a part of our own cultural aspect of it.
Right.
But it has moved into now, the fast dancehall, thing, which is more adopting from, the beats of the US. So I'm saying that to say, in terms of, again, because we were brought into this country, we're still into Jamaica. We're still trying to find who we are, right? So in terms of what it can be, so when you look at even our stories from a cultural aspect, our stories that we have, we grew up on Anansi's story, right? What is Anansi? Ajinal, right? So some of the other stronger African stories that we that exist, we don't have it,
Right.
right? The other, story that we have about, Nanny, right? It's a fairy tale. So we don't have any strong historical base. So we're not anchored as a people. We're not as anchored as we could be. So in terms of looking back and moving forward, we don't have those strong historical ties. And I think that leads to where our people are. We're like a rudderless ship in the ocean right now. In terms of our young people, there's nothing that they can look back to, and that's one of the reasons why I find that they sway in the wind like the willow tree, and they move from here or there. It doesn't matter. Any little scamming thing that comes on, and even the brightest of them among us, when we had the multi layer marketing, thing with Olint and Cash Plus, even lawyers, churches were got caught up in the whole thing, right? So we don't have any anchor as a people, and that's because, and that has to do with our history and having a firm historical base, and then we can move from there,
Hey,
right?
Steve, we're coming up to the 30-minute mark. That was
Okay.
the marker. Although I kind of agree with you, the music has changed, but I remember there was a time when Jim Reeves and all of those, what do you call it? Those country music used to be played in the early '70s, and the bigger fowl them used to say, "Hey, that Rasta music, the Dennis Brown and the Bob Marleys were." So I just want to make sure you remember. It could be your age while you're looking at the skilly bangs and the skeng and thinking that their music is coming from the US, or the trap style is coming from the US, because these guys are they're evolving all the time.
Right. So let me give you one further.
Okay.
I remember the '70s. My uncle came down from the U.S.
Okay.
and, so it would have
And
been
round it
the
up now, Steve, please. Yeah.
'70s. and he remarked that he's listening to the radio station and didn't hear one reggae music on the radio station. It was all US R&B. So we have always been influenced by the US. And then later on, the only person I'm hearing playing African music, or the first African music I heard, was actually on Muta Baruka's program. So we're predominantly what? Africans, but we don't hear nothing from Africa. Anyway, my brother, it was a blessing talking to you.
All right.
And
Hey, and there's part two coming.
yeah, because we got sidetracked and we not even come up. We're still there at the will.
No, no,
We
no,
not
no,
even come
no,
up.
no, no. But that's because you read the will. But guess what? We're gonna do part two. All right.
All right, no worries.
Okay.